I'm very glad to be here. And I'm very glad also to talk after these speakers. Basically, it's the same perspective, but I'm coming from the economic side, not the psychological side. And then we focus much more on development, what is the goal of societies. And I'm going to talk about happiness as a new development discourse. Basically, the main idea here is that during the 20th century, we talk about pursuing economic growth. And we separate countries in developed and underdeveloped countries on the basis of per capita income. And the idea is that this model creates the idea that the goal of societies is to increase income and to have larger and larger per capita incomes. We may go to $40,000, $60,000, $100,000, and happiness provides a different perspective. I'm also glad to talk about these speakers because I completely agree with this idea that happiness is a choice, but it is a collective choice, not an individual choice. Actually, there is a difference between what we call an individual and what we call a person. A person is defined in society. An individual is always out of context. It's like you, and it's your responsibility. But there is no person without circumstance. We all live in an age, a history, a theoretical framework that provides the idea of success, of failure in life, that provides, as some people say, nurturing under different conditions, and that's what we are. So we cannot detach, we can never detach the circumstances from the person. They are part of who we are. Of course, that also includes identity, and that's an important issue. And then policies are made within this framework. And I would like to talk with you today is about a framework which is based, a theoretical framework that guides policy making and which is based on the idea that the goal is to pursue economic growth. And this emphasis in economic growth neglects many aspects of human lives. This idea of domains of life tells you that there is more to money in life. Not everything is about money, and of course that means also that we should not measure fairness only on income, an income-based approach, but we should recognize that there are husbands, wives, that you have partners, you have kids. That's an important part of your life. You have your health, and so on. So basically the idea, I will skip this, but basically the idea is that you can find many countries where per capita income is very high and happiness is low. And Chile is one of these examples in Latin America, and you have a country with less per capita income and much more happiness. And one point I would like to make here is not only life satisfaction. If you check the last column, that's life economic satisfaction. Chileans have more income, and they are not even satisfied in the economic domain because aspirations are also rising with income. And as you have more income, you have more aspirations, you have more materialistic values, and what matters for economic satisfaction is not how much you have, but the gap between what you have and what you would like to have. And if that gap is increasing, even if you have more income, you will be less satisfied, and this reduces happiness. But then the main point is income is not by itself a final goal in society. We need to move from the idea of economic growth, which dominated economic theory in the 20th century, to a new framework that emphasizes happiness as a final goal. And this implies moving from objects to persons. And notice that my point is persons, not individuals. We need to emphasize that the end of society is in how people experience well-being and not the possessions they have. These possessions may be important, but they are important if they contribute to how people experience well-being. And this is another point. No? We need to move from possessions to experiences. My point here is that well-being, happiness, is not a construct. Happiness is not something that a researcher, an academician comes here and defines. This is happiness. Happiness is something that happens to concrete human beings. You know if you are happy or not. I don't have to come here and elaborate a model and tell you, look, according to my computations, you are unhappy. That's not. No, the role of researchers is not to judge people's happiness. It's to understand people's happiness, to develop models and do research, test hypotheses to check. So happiness is something concrete. Everybody knows if they are angry, sad. Everybody knows if they are achieving their goals, wherever those goals are. And so we work with this life satisfaction measure. And the basic idea is that it is in human condition to have experiences of being well. Well-being is the experience of being well people have. And people have affective experiences, positive, negatives. People have goals in life, aspirations, and they achieve or fail. People have five senses, and we have pain and pleasure. And people have these states of flow, energy, that you get through different ways, yoga, meditation. And people, it is in human condition to make a synthesis. People are able of saying, I'm okay with my life. I'm not okay. And of course, we ask questions on a 1 to 10 scale or whatever. That's a different point, but it is in human condition. So when we talk about happiness, we are talking about something that happens to every human being, and you do not need to have a PhD to experience happiness. You don't need even to be able to read. What you need is to be human. That's sufficient to experience happiness. And of course, you know that in the 20th century, we developed this gross domestic product, and we made of GDP the final aim. And our point is that this is very limited to capture happiness. 40 years ago, a professor, Richard Easterling, developed this research and the idea that income may have an impact, but income is not everything. So income is not the end of society. It may be an instrument, and we could be able to use it in a better way. There are many ways of using it. But in order to use income more efficiently, we need to recognize that happiness incorporates other drivers, and we need to study how income relates to happiness. And we need to move beyond what I call the 20th century progress as economic growth paradigm. And we need to move to a new paradigm, and this implies changing many concepts, because we are also, as persons, we are also involved in a theoretical framework that guides our policy making. And this theoretical framework needs to be changed. If you know the history of the 20th century and how we created GDP, we wanted to study why some countries had more GDP per capita than others. What was the explanation? And then by the mid-20th century, economists started working with physical capital, basically investments, machinery, buildings, and natural capital, basically the resources you can extract from the planet. And they said this does not explain differences across countries. So let's incorporate new explanatory variables. And we move from capital, natural capital, physical capital, to human capital. What are the skills people have to be productive? What kind of education contributes to more productivity? But we couldn't explain GDP. Then we added another explanation. which is basically social capital. What interactions promote income? What kind of relations allow me to make more money? No? Weak and strong interactions in sociology. And we have also in our paradigm, we have this idea that working is something bad. You work because they pay you. You need a reward. You do not get satisfaction from your work. And this other idea that leisure is unproductive. If you are doing leisure, you could be working and producing commodities and making more income. Leisure is unproductive in this paradigm. And these ideas are the ones that we need to change to have a new framework that guides policy making in the 21st century. Basically, I think we need to move from the idea of physical capital to community. It is not about freeways, skyscrapers, big buildings. It's about people living there in this surrounding. So we need to emphasize that we belong to a community. It's not housing, it's people living there, interacting. And that's a different concept than physical capital. We need to emphasize that it is not about natural capital, but about our home. This planet is our home, and resources provide services beyond being inputs for production. It is not only about extraction to produce more commodities, but about our home, and we would like to have a clean home now and a cleaner home for the future generations. It is not about human capital, and this is a point I would like to stress. When you talk about human capital, you emphasize an education that provides the skills to be productive. And that's not what we want. You are looking at kids at kindergarten, and with this concept, what do you see? The future labor force. They are labor force. They are not human beings that deserve to enjoy happiness like while they are kids, and to get the skills to be happy when they are adults. So we need a different kind of education, but this enters within this perspective that we should no longer see them as human capital, but as human beings that need skills for enjoying life. We need to move from social capital to human relations, the intrinsic value of being with others. Not because they are connections, they are opportunities to make more money, no, but because we enjoy being together. That's important. That's the intrinsic value of human relations. And you know that when human relations are non-interest human relations, they provide more gratification. So human beings are at the center and not, and two additional points. Leisure is very productive. It produces happiness. And I say this because in Latin America, we are very productive, not producing economic goods. We are very productive producing happiness. And you can see that in the data, no? And leisure is very important. And we need to have this idea that working may contribute to happiness. And when we talk about jobs and works, we should talk not only about how much income you get there, but what is the satisfaction you get from this work. One final point, we do a lot of research on poverty and happiness. And you have to be careful about measuring poverty only on the basis of income, because then you say they have more income, oh, now they are better. We know of many, many cases where you jump over the poverty line, but people are still unsatisfied with their life. Typical example, you have more income now because your partner is also working, but they do not see each other because one works the night shift and the other the morning shift, and they do not see each other. Kids are growing alone. Of course, you have more income, you are a successful observation in databases, but life keeps being miserable. We need to move out of poverty through the green line, not the brown or orange line. And that's basically my point. No? There is more to life than income. We should not confuse also consumers with persons. In economics, we talk a lot about consumers, and people are people, not consumers. No? And this includes, for policymaking, we have a lot of other recommendations specific, but that's my point. Thank you.